Hello, this is Isaac Rayberg, the host of the 1662 Fellowship podcast. And today we're going to be starting a new little mini-series where I've conducted an interview with the Most Reverend Peter Robinson, Presiding Bishop of the United Episcopal Church of North America. And it was a wonderful long conversation, but because of that length, I have split it up into several episodes. We began this first episode talking about a little bit of our common history in the world of the Continuum. My own home parish began in that world back in the 1970s, and that is a world with which Bishop Robinson is very familiar. And so we're going to begin talking with a little bit of history and how that relates to the formularies. Thank you. Well, welcome back to the 1662 Fellowship of North America, where we promote the historic Anglican formularies as the theological center of gravity for Orthodox Anglicanism in North America. I'm Isaac Rayberg, the Archdeacon for Liturgy in the Anglican Diocese of All Nations and the Rector of All Saints Anglican Church in San Antonio, Texas. And today I am joined with a special guest, the Most Reverend Peter Robinson, Presiding Bishop of the United Episcopal Church of North America. Bishop, welcome to the program.
Good morning. Nice of you to have me on.
Would you tell us a little bit about yourself and about the UECNA and how y'all kind of came to be?
The UECNA comes out of the 1977 Coninuing Anglican movement. And one of the problems that the movement encountered immediately after, everybody talks about St. Louis and Denver, but what happened in the following 3 years is basically a major rewrite of the Constitution and canons. And this at the time proved highly divisive.
With based on more like the affirmation of St. Louis and that sort of thing?
Yeah. As it was explained to me by a bishop in another continuing Anglican jurisdiction, the intent was to make sure that Anglo-Catholics were never a minority again.
Mm.
And as part of sort of the factional discomfort, the United Episcopal Church was founded in 1981 specifically as a sort of middle-of-the-road to low church continuing Episcopal church. And to that end, it adopted the 1958 canons of the Episcopal Church with a few adaptions. It's the only jurisdiction in North America that, as far as I know, that includes the 39 articles in its declaration of conformity.
Yeah, I've noticed when I've just kind of shopped around looking at some of the other continuing bodies, most of them don't mention the articles at all on their website or in any way, shape, or form. The bishop, our church, All Saints, has a background in the Continuum. I think we were originally in the oh gosh, I forget which one, American Episcopal Church, but one of our bishops was kind of a bit of a low church holdover, and he got so much grief that I'm told he had a heart attack at Synod one year because of all the grief he got for being so low church.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I can understand some of those difficulties. Yeah. And but you weren't kind of part of that initial movement. That was way before your time, right?
Oh no, I'm basically, I've been in the Continuum a little bit over 30 years. I came along when the Church of England voted to ordain women in the early 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
My background is in Northern England. I grew up in the sort of Church of England parish that was central churchmanship leaning high, which to Americans I think would seem quite low.
We are oddly high, even among lower folks. What we would call low is pretty high everywhere else.
Yeah. Um, I started off in the Continuum in the Anglican Catholic Church. Unfortunately, I ran into one of their extreme bishops. So I ended up in the Free Church of England for a few years, which is the English counterpart of the REC.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I initially moved to the USA, I was in the ACA, Anglican Church in America. Hit the old problem of it gradually creeping higher and higher and higher until the day after the bishops had all trooped up and signed the Roman Catholic Catechism on the altar of St. Agatha's Land Port in Portsmouth as part of their dash to Rome, as I called it.
Mm.
My parish voted to leave the ACA.
Yeah,
And at
I
that
actually have
point,
never heard that story. That's an episode that has completely escaped my own
oh,
research.
yeah, they buried that one 6 foot under and backed the cement mixer up to it.
Oh my.
But then my parish voted to join the UECNA at that point, and I was elected at a bishop at the 2008 General Convention of the UECNA, consecrated early the following year, and I've been presiding bishop since 2010.
Okay, so you've been in the episcopacy. Your episcopacy and presiding episcopacy uh, is about the same amount of time as the ACNA has been around. Yeah, like that was all
Yeah,
happening at the same time. Very interesting.
yes. We sort of were giving the ACNA the sort of, oh, what's going on there? Look.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I understand that. I was first kind of introduced to continuing Anglicanism a few years before that, and I had for my own kind of denominational background, I was very wary of very small bodies, and didn't know what to do with myself. So I was watching all of that very carefully at the time, and yeah, that's very interesting. Very interesting. Now, you have been pretty prolific in writing wonderful little things on Facebook, and that I always pay attention to. Matter of fact, I have a saved folder in my Facebook just of those things that you have done. And I think your blog beforehand may have been the one that introduced me to the idea of old high churchmanship when I was brand new back into the Anglican world. I had thought you got your snake belly low and you got your Anglo Catholics, and that's all there is. But you introduced to me, and I'm sure to others, this older idea of high churchmanship, and you've written a lot about that over the years. I take it the blog's no longer active. You've kind of moved most of that to Facebook. Is that right?
Yeah, one of the problems I had with the blog was it's not really a natural format for me.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to write fairly short, fairly focused pieces. And I just sort of became a little bit kind of frustrated with the format.
That's very,
So,
very understandable. Yeah.
yeah, so now I just unleash the odd thing on Facebook or wherever. Uh,
Well, it's been very helpful. There was a one about a month, maybe month and a half ago, where you talk. We talk here on this podcast about the center of the theological center of gravity, and you did a piece titled "The Center of Gravity" with that wonderful English spelling of center. And I'd love to talk about your 8 points and how you ordered those.
Hang on a sec. One of the little problems we have is I forget to turn the phone off.
No worries, no worries at all.
Um, basically, one of the things that's been lost in Anglicanism, it seems to me, particularly in North America, is any concept of the church having a center.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing, American Anglicanism, to an Englishman's eye, is curiously lopsided. There's very little evangelicalism of any age. Most of what is called evangelical in America is, to my eye, neo-evangelicalism, influenced by the charismatic movement, very much a product of to some degree, of the convergence movement of the 1970s and the 1980s. Your high churchmanship has gradually become varying degrees of Anglo-Catholicism.
Right, right.
And then, of course, the happy center of the church became increasingly liberal. Although liberalism in the American Episcopal Church really comes out of evangelicalism at the end of the 19th century. So you have people like Phillips Brooks beginning to read the German higher critics, losing their biblical focus and moving into the evangelical camp, which is why, for example, Massachusetts was one of the dioceses that became liberal quite early on because of the influence of Phillips Brooks and then Bishop Lawrence. However, Anglicanism does have a central tradition. And what it really comes out of is not, as one would suspect, a compromise between high and low. The central tradition is really the old high churchmanship, the old pre-Tractarian church that came out of the early 17th century. So although Laudianism, or the English Arminians, or the Caroline Divines, whichever name you give them, are often marketed as being the precursors of the Anglo-Catholics, they weren't. They're actually the precursors kind of a very strong central Anglican identity. And of course, we're inclined to think of Anglican identity these days in terms of not much more than the Chicago-Lambeth Quadrilateral. So, Holy Scripture, the Nicene and Apostles' Creeds, baptism and Holy Communion, the Episcopate locally adapted.
Right, right. And that's a product of late 19th century as well.
Yeah, and it's a product of late 19th century ecumenicism.
Right,
it's not
right.
really
It was not supposed
intended.
to be. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really intended to define Anglicanism at all. It's who will we talk to ecumenically?
And that's helpful. I think of some of my confessional Lutheran friends who basically say, if you can't sign on to our confessions, then we really can never have pulpit and table fellowship. And that's not what we said. We said actually there's a wider minimum for that ecumenism, but that doesn't mean we have to chunk out some of our distinctives.
Right. Then, although that's fine from the point of view of who do we talk to ecumenically, it does leave you with a problem with what's Anglicanism.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, what you come back round to is how much do the Anglican formularies influence the present day state of Anglicanism? Well, if you're going to use the CLQ as the basis of what defines Anglicanism, you haven't really got much to hang your hat on theologically or historically. So what you find as you look back at the old high churchmen is they have a strong emphasis on the 39 Articles, not the sort of fundamentalist reading that you will get from the guys who don't know the difference between the Westminster Confession of Faith and the 39 Articles,
Right, right.
nor the very weird reading that you get out of John Henry Newman and his friends, but a sort of, here are the 39 Articles. This is, a grammatical way of understanding.
Yeah, let them speak for themselves. Absolutely.
Yes. That tends in Old High Church theology to be rooted in the early fathers.
We'll go ahead and wrap up that first segment of our interviews right there, with discussing the how the articles and the fathers work together, and that is where we will pick up next time. How do the church fathers work in this classical, formularies-driven Anglican context? We'll see you next time. God bless.